It's time for the biggest story of the day. This is What Made the Cut with JJ and Alex on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
And the cut brought to you this hour by an incredible selection of Kia, Subaru, Chevy, Jeep, Dodge, or Ram, and now Mitsubishi. It's the Doug Smith family of dealerships. You can join them, of course, anywhere down there in American Fork, Spanish Fork, or in Linden, now where the Kia dealership is. Join us on the program. He, of course, helped us break down a little bit what these playoffs are going to look like. Cody Benjamin, CBS Sports NFL writer. Cody, how'd this one wrap up for you? Was it boring for you to watch this football game? Because it kind of was for us.
Well, thanks for having me on. First of all, I heard you talking about, instituting the holiday. I feel you there. I mean, I spent part of this morning. I didn't know what day it was. It was, the game. I felt bad for people who didn't have an investment in this game. You always do. I mean, the one that obviously I thought of was the Tampa Bay Chiefs Super Bowl, but even more than that, going back even farther, the Peyton Manning Super Bowl where the Broncos got blown out by the Seahawks. That kind of came to mind too. And those are games where it's just like, well, we waited all year for this kind of a thing. And, if you're an Eagles fan, obviously it was kind of a sweet relief from what occurred 2 years ago. If you're a Chiefs fan, I mean, you've still got a lot of rings. And so, yeah, it was not the most, certainly not even close to being competitive, not the most fun game from a casual viewer's perspective. But I do think there's still some cool storylines to unpack, especially from the Eagles' perspective, what they were able to do, just bouncing back from the state that they were in at the end of last year.
Before we dig into the Eagles and what they accomplished last night, I did want to hit the Chiefs. They were hyped up coming into this game. It was going to be a three-peat. We were talking about the dynasty. We were having these conversations about Mahomes and Tom Brady and making a comparison. How did their performance last night impact the way we're going to look at this period of time with this Chiefs team and what they've been able to accomplish?
Yeah, I mean, the first thought I had at the end of the game or as it was winding down, because it was over, it felt over so quickly, was, were these Chiefs even good this year? And I know that's an exaggeration because they made the Super Bowl. Obviously, you don't get there by accident. But all year long, it was the same storyline every week with the Chiefs. How are they sneaking by? Maybe it was a call here. Maybe it was a field goal there. Maybe it was a timely Patrick Mahomes scramble. All those things happened. The Chiefs deserve credit for getting by. But it's also like they played that game a lot last year, too, and it's just hard to sustain that. That's why teams don't sustain, winning football games that way, winning on the margins the way they have. In terms of the big picture, the legacy, I mean, I'm not ready to say this takes Mahomes out of – I mean, give it a few months. I mean, give it a year, and we're going to be looking still at the grand scheme, the big picture of Patrick Mahomes' legacy, Andy Reid's legacy. Yes, it hurts, but at the end of the day, it's hard to win a Super Bowl, let alone multiple, and they've done that. And Patrick Mahomes is still young. I mean, he talked about I think people were asking him, in the lead up to the game, how much more did he have left even? And he almost laughed at it. Like he's got plenty left in the tank to try and chase, Tom Brady. So yes, it's a black mark, the fact that it was so ugly, but I think in the grand scheme of things, we don't need to make too big a deal about it.
So the Eagles, of course, show up, and their defense was, Vic Fangio dialed up an absolute crazy game last night for that Eagles defense. So when you see kind of Jalen Hurts win the MVP, the reality is that Eagles defense really was the thing to hold the Chiefs. Not even they didn't go anywhere for the first 9 drives, and they had 14 yards in the first half. How does this Eagles team get worse this offseason? So many pieces are going to stay there in Philly for a while.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned the defense was clearly the catalyst in the Super Bowl, and yet Hurts won MVP. I almost view these Eagles-Chiefs Super Bowls together, hand in hand. And it was almost as if, Jalen Hurts, it was kind of his coming out party in that Super Bowl 2 years ago, and he played like an MVP in that game besides the fumble. It was almost like this game, it was like the heavens rewarded him for his performance in that Super Bowl by finally giving him, way more defensive support than he even needed. And so he kind of got the Super Bowl MVP 2 years late, and so I think, defensively, the great thing about it is, too, Vic Fangio obviously called a great game, But the personnel, you talk about looking ahead at this offseason, the personnel is young on that side of the ball. I mean, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, early 20s, rookie, defensive rookie of the year candidates. Jalen Carter, he's a second-year player. Milton Williams, he's due for free agency, but he could come back. I think, every level, that's also a testament to just Howie Roseman's roster building. I mean, these teams that get back to this stage so quickly, it's not just one person. It's not just the quarterback. It's not just the coach. It's the whole package. And Howie Roseman's a huge part of that for assembling that defense.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on the MVP talk, but which of these defensive players would you give it to? Because there's so many to choose from. So many of them stepped up last night.
Yeah, I mean, I think I wouldn't be upset if it were any of, I'd say the ones that come to mind are Cooper DeJean with the pick six. Obviously, that was a huge play. It almost felt like it buried the Chiefs. Zach Bond with a diving pick, and, probably he could have deserved Defensive Player of the Year. I think he would have been worthy. He's always involved in the front seven there. And then obviously, Josh Sweat and Milton Williams. I mean, both of those guys really making an impact on the pocket. I think you could have given it to any one of those guys. You could have given it to Devontae Smith for that crazy catch, the touchdown in his home state. I think it just speaks to, that's why, they beat him by 18 points, because it was a true team, domination there. And that's why there were so many worthy MVP candidates.
Of all the things that happened last night, how on earth is it that one of the weirdest stats we've ever seen is Devontae Smith is the first Alabama player ever to be drafted and score a touchdown in the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I honestly, I mean, the obscure stats that we pull from these things, I mean, and the one that stood out to me was that Jalen Hurts is only the second quarterback, I believe, to ever complete at least 70% of his passes and score at least 3 touchdowns in multiple Super Bowls. It's he and Tom Brady.
Wow.
That's the list. And so obviously there's been other quarterbacks who maybe they complete 65% of the passes and they have a great stretch. But I think it does speak to, it is kind of time that it's kind of crazy that Jalen Hurts, you look at him, he's only 26 still. He's only had 4 seasons as the full-time starter in Philadelphia. He's been to 2 Super Bowls, won one, and could have won the other. And so I think it's really he's a great example of, we all have this idea in today's NFL what it's supposed to look like at quarterback. You're supposed to have these pretty passing numbers. You're supposed to look a certain way when you play the game at that position. He wins. Obviously, he's part of a team. It's a team sport, but man, I mean, he's really cementing his case as one of the elite quarterbacks.
Yeah, another one of those strange stats you talk about is the fact that Jalen Hurts is just the 5th quarterback to ever win a Super Bowl after losing his first Super Bowl start. So he really was impressive. What respect did he earn around the league by getting that ring? Because you look at his career. I mean, we remember he got benched at Alabama for Tua, and now it seems like that's insane. How did that happen? But he seems to be a guy that just goes about his business. I like the way he handles himself. He's never too high, never too low. He's a really chill personality. But how is he viewed around the league now that he has this ring?
Well, the ring definitely helps. I mean, it's funny how the margins are so slim here. I mean, because we talked about 2 years ago, the Eagles were so close to beating the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. But if Jalen Hurts' career would have ended, after that game, or he would have gone 10 years and never gotten back, I mean, certainly he'd be looked at differently. I think that, you mentioned the Alabama thing, and it's a cliche sometimes that guys, they just go to work or they stay level-headed. I mean, he's taken it to a different degree because of the circumstances. I mean, being benched in a national championship, going to another national championship and losing as a freshman. There's so many examples, being drafted to a team in the Eagles that we forget at the time. Carson Wentz, the Eagles were committed to this guy. It was kind of an awkward place for him to enter. He endured staff turnover early in his career. He has suffered a Super Bowl loss and got back 2 years later. I just think, he's wired differently, mentally especially. And again, you don't win the Super Bowl without the help of the supporting cast, but also the job of the quarterback is to maximize the talent around him. he has done that. And the most impressive thing to me is really taking this year in light of what happened last year. At the end of last season, I thought the Eagles were dead, like totally dead, and I wouldn't have been surprised if Nick Sirianni was fired. I mean, if you would have told me last year at the end of that season that a year from now, Hurts and Sirianni would be smiling together holding a Lombardi trophy, I would not have believed it. And so it's a testament to their fortitude.
What's his bodyguard's name? Because he couldn't get
Big Dom.
Is it Big Dom?
Big Dom.
Big Dom had as much TV time at the end of the game as anybody. Okay, so I know Vegas the day after always gets people to bite on early predictions on next year's Super Bowl, but let's go with the legitimate shots. People who have the real chance of being in this Super Bowl next year in Super Bowl 60. Who are the ones? Give us two from each conference that you think have a real shot of being champions next year. You have to think that the Eagles would retool because a lot of those guys are just going to stick around anyway.
Yeah. I won't say the Eagles just because we know that they should be in the mix. I mean, if you're looking at the NFC, I think it's hard not to like what you see in Washington. I mean, they got blown out in the NFC title game, but that's a quick turnaround there. Under a new regime, Jaden Daniels just seems to have the it factor. You talk about guys who are level-headed, built for the big stage. He seems to have that. I mean, if you actually get him an additional wide receiver, you get him some defensive support. I mean, even if they're a little bit better defensively next year, that's a team that should be in the mix. The upside is just there under center. In the NFC North, I mean, everyone's going to point at the Lions, and rightfully so. I think the Packers, this was a weird year for them where Jordan Love and basically every wide receiver was banged up at different points. I still think his ceiling is pretty high, and Matt LaFleur he's only ever really been in the playoffs as the Packers coach. And so I think those are two from the NFC to watch. In the AFC, I'm still a Lamar Jackson believer. I guess it's, I believe he'll advance to the Super Bowl when I see it, but I just think there's so much talent there that eventually they break through. And in the same division, Joe Burrow, he just seems ripe for a kind of a Hurts-esque return to that kind of stage. Just another guy who's wired for those moments if he can get some help around him.
There's always something that happens in the offseason that changes the landscape and puts one team above the others. And you see the Saquon Barkley addition that the Eagles worked out. Obviously, that played a huge role in them winning a Super Bowl. As we head into this offseason, what are some of those free agents out there or some of those things that could happen that you think could have that kind of an impact?
Yeah, it's tough. Always you're pointing first at the quarterback position. Not a really inspiring group this year. The Aaron Rodgers saga, if it continues elsewhere, that's more interesting from just a tabloid perspective, I guess. Derek Carr, that's a guy who could be on the move. Geno Smith, maybe an out there trade candidate if the Seahawks, try and go younger in the draft. I think the draft is a key spot too. I'm looking at the Raiders. What are they going to do with Tom Brady clearly holding some influence there? Do they try and move up to get Shedeur Sanders? Do they really take a big money gamble on Sam Darnold? I think that the quarterback carousel, the quarterback dominoes are always what I'm looking at first. I don't know that there's one that's really going to move the needle necessarily. I guess the one team that I'm especially interested in is the Vikings because they really overperformed with Sam Darnold. They like J.J. McCarthy, but they can't also just go into week one, fully riding on him. And so they're kind of a weird transition year, kind of a state there in Minnesota.
Well, it's been a ton of fun, obviously, but there's also there's the massive sigh of relief at the end of a season. There's also the part where we go, what on earth are we going to do without football for the next few months? So congrats on your new coverage of the UFL the rest of the year. We appreciate it, Cody.
Don't even tell me. I don't need that. I shouldn't say that. It is part of the job to some level.
But the NFL never sleeps. When's the combine? You going to go ahead and do that?
To be honest, my focus more. We do have a whole team of draft writers that will be really on that. I think a lot of it it's going to go quickly, like turning the page to free agency, and March is a huge moment for a lot of teams. I guess setting the stage. The Eagles just won the Super Bowl guys like Zach Bond, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, these guys that they acquired in free agency. That starts very soon, so it'll be here.
Can't wait.
Cody Benjamin, NFL writer for CBS Sports. We appreciate you joining us, Cody, and we'll chat with you when things get fired back up again with the NFL. Have fun in the semi-off season, but you know what? Stay busy, though.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me back on.
There you go.
Thank you.
Cody Benjamin, everybody.